The following is rated S for spoilers.
Takes more than that, doesn't it?
What, to steal from the Empire? What do you need? A uniform, some dirty hands, and an Imperial toolkit. They're so proud of themselves, they don't even care. They're so fat and satisfied, they can't imagine it.
Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Hangover. My name is Alex, and today we are going to be discussing Andor, the newest Star Wars show on Disney Plus, created by Tony Gilroy, starring a whole band of goons: Diego Luna, Kyle Soller, Stellan Skarsgård, Genevieve O'Reilly, and Denise Gao, releasing initially on September 21st of 2022, concluding on November 23rd of 2022. Today, I am once again missing Graham, but don't worry, because we have Brenden Janeczko making a grand return to the podcast to talk about one of his favorite shows, I feel like, in recent memory. Brenden, how are you doing?
Doing good. Happy to be back.
Yeah.
Ready to roll. This is fun. Gonna be the sixth man of the podcast.
Exactly.
How is this trending? Better be up for an award or something.
Yeah. There's a favorite guest award every year.
Let's go.
Voted on by the fans. Brenden, what were your thoughts on Andor? Because I feel like in the discussions I've had with you, I feel like you really, really liked this show.
Yeah, no, arguably this has got to be my favorite piece of Star Wars content to hit Disney Plus, I think.
Okay. Even more than Mandalorian?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. The only thing that Mandalorian has going for it, which is probably something we'll chat about later, is the fact that we do see Luke Skywalker eventually in there.
Right.
So I think that's like the only thing that may differentiate the two. But this show is phenomenal. I don't think there was a week where I was really kind of not sure. You know, I think throughout the whole series, I was pretty interested. It started off a little slower than I had anticipated. Yeah. But with them giving them those extra episodes, it made all the difference. It really helped them explore the character arcs and give these characters the time that they really needed. So I really do believe that this is some top tier stuff that we're seeing here.
Yeah, really cool. Absolutely. I'm still trying to figure out what my thoughts are on this show. I think I just need to sit down and watch it again is really what needs to happen. Because in general, I don't like shows. I prefer movies. And the reason I don't like shows is because of shows like this, where there's a million. It's called Andor, and I'm going to go into this show expecting to be watching something about Cassian Andor. And all the stuff with Andor was fantastic. I loved it. But then we have all of these other side stories that I just didn't care about right off the get-go. And some of them I did learn and end up growing to care about. But at least to start, I just didn't. I still could care less about the guard who got fired at the first 3 episodes and then went to Coruscant and got yelled at by his mom every couple of episodes. I couldn't care less about it. I don't even know the guy's name. It's just, there was just a lot of extra stuff that I didn't care about. But that being said, when looking at it objectively, I can acknowledge the fact that that style of show was done really brilliantly. Like, in terms of story, if you look at across all 12 episodes, you start with the inciting incident, every single event that happened ended up affecting something that would happen later. And you can follow everything very clearly. There's no just random jumps or acts that happen for no reason, that massive coincidences. It's everything all these parallel stories all have different effects that when you get to the finale, bring everybody together and starts the rebellion. Yeah. In its biggest form at that point in time. And so I can acknowledge the brilliance of it, just it wasn't for me. Yeah. At least on a first watch.
On a first watch. Wasn't for you in terms of the show just was bad? What was your rating? What would you rate it out of 5, I guess?
I don't, that's a good question. A 3 or a 4. And honestly, I feel like the best way to do it is just go on TikTok. I did a weekly rundown, reaction to all of the episodes. And you can kind of see like where the shift happened. Like the first 3 episodes, for example, it should have just been one, maybe 90-minute long premiere. It did not need to be 3 episodes. Like while some of the stuff was really cool, especially that 3rd episode, like the sequence in the like the mill or whatever, like that whole action sequence. Like there's a lot of really cool ideas and things that are sprinkled in, but I feel like those first 3 episodes took so long to get to the point. The stuff on Aldani, I feel like there were 2 episodes of them wandering around being like, we have a plan. We're not going to tell you the plan because we want you to be surprised when you do the heist, but we have a plan. Let's practice. Cut away. They come back like, wow, what a great practice. Let's practice again. And then they cut away to other stuff. And then we get the Aldani heist. But like, I didn't need 2 episodes of you prepping for the heist without you actually like telling me anything. Or in like, you're just developing these characters that do end up having an impact on Cassian. And I think when you look at it big picture, like I feel like you can see a lot of how they were taking Cassian in Rogue One and explaining a lot of his tendencies. And I think that was really, really cool. Maybe a little unnecessary for a side character and a side story. But I think it's a cool idea, and I do appreciate that aspect of it. But I feel like they had these arcs that were just really spread out because they had all of the story they needed to tell. And so they needed all 12 episodes, but I really wish it wasn't 12 episodes. I think would be my one sentence review. It needs to be 12 to like have the full impact of the finale. But I just don't want to watch all 12 of them.
I get that. Yeah, I'm like right at a 4.5 out of 5. Like it was so good. I liked it a lot. And part of that's probably because of like those last few episodes, and the whole prison arc is just so good.
The prison arc was just pure perfection.
I don't think anything is going to come close to topping that for a while. And I think it's because we're both such big fans of the Clone Wars. Yeah. And we got like that mini series inside of this that just felt so Clone Wars-esque, you could say. And it was beautiful. And it's just cool to see that in live action and not just get thrown with a bunch of nostalgia type stuff at your face and some like spotty, virtual production work and, all that stuff. And this just really, really felt refreshing in that department. But my two knocks would be what you kind of stated, was a few pacing issues at the beginning, and why are we even following this prison guard? Like,
I know there's a season 2.
I would love to go. I needed to go back through before we recorded this. I should have went through and just recorded how many minutes this dude was on screen by himself. Like, there's no point. I don't.
And maybe I'm missing, because I have seen so many reviews praising Kyle Soller. Like, he had such a great performance. Like, it was such a dark, like reflection of like what obsession looks like. And I was like, that's fine. If I wanted that, I'll go watch Whiplash or Black Swan. I'm not gonna go sit here and watch this kid get yelled at by his mom because he doesn't have a job. Like, I don't care. It
felt like a personal attack. I was just, pause. Please no more.
Well, this is Star Wars. It's supposed to be a fantasy. I don't need this realism in my life.
Get out of here. No, the realism was part of the reason why I love it so much, right? Like, it really blurred the lines for me between Star Wars and something that felt much more like down to earth, very, very dirty. It felt like I was in the trenches almost. Like, normally you get such a like big picture when you're watching Star Wars content. It's like, oh, this is what's going to change the course of, the fate. And this ties into that. But, oh man. And I think that's part of the reason why we liked Rogue One so much, was we got a little bit more of that like micro piece. Even though there's this big overarching story that's moving forward, they did such a good job with our characters and with the supporting cast. And this just took it to another level. And the first time I even really heard about this show was when we went to go watch Rogue One again in theaters. And we got the little sneak peek for the show. And right when I watched that sneak peek, I was like, dude, this is gonna be good.
Yeah.
I am very excited. Just what we saw there was a really good taste. It was perfect. So yeah, there's definitely a few issues, but the realism, gosh, man, that was awesome.
Yeah, I'll try to find it and I'll link it in the show notes below, but there's a really great article. I think it's just on StarWars.com with Tony Gilroy and talking about how like the mindset going into creating this show. Because again, it's kind of ridiculous to make an entire show about a side character from some side movie who ends up dying at the end. Like, it's not like there's any more story to tell on the surface. Just hearing about like their approach and how like, they were taking Rogue One and like the grittiness of it. And then they just dialed that level up to 10. And just, I like how we're seeing different aspects of the Star Wars universe. And one of our very early episodes, we did a Star Wars episode, and I made the very bold claim that in 10, 20 years, Star Wars will be the greatest cinematic universe of all time. Because the MCU is fantastic. It's great, but it's all very linear. There's one massive plan. It was always a plan. But Star Wars was not that way, and they are filling in all of these gaps, and I think that makes it a much more impressive feat than the MCU. The MCU walked so Star Wars can now run, and that might be a bit of an over-dramatic statement, but like, I don't know, just it was they're taking things that we already know. We know the Empire's evil, but then they're showing us like Cassian gets sentenced to prison for 6 years, not because he robbed an Imperial vault, but for nothing, right? Like, the thing that he actually did was fine, but he was just a bystander, and he was arrested for 6 years. And even just like small details, like how I thought it was the post-credit scene was just brilliant to me, because he spends all this time building this stuff, and he's like, it must be important to them. And the fact that the thing that he was building is a thing that was ultimately his demise, is so like poetic, I guess. There's just a lot of very small, subtle things where like, we know how this all works. We know how it all ends, but seeing all the intricacies of it, like built out and fleshed out in a show, I think is making a lot of Star Wars fans very, very happy.
Getting the complete picture definitely helps. I think I remember listening to that episode of you guys early on when you first started the pod, and I think I remember hearing you say something like that. And I totally agree. I think the ability for them, especially with stuff like this, to be able to kind of rewind the clock and get these kind of minute stories where we get characters. And I think one of the things that really helps them in this situation is they know everyone already loved this character.
Right.
So it kind of took out a lot of the guesswork. Like, they knew that this was going to be successful, which allowed them to stretch. I hope that piggybacking off of this success, that it gives them the courage to keep making more content like this and being able to feel confident in creating brand new characters without, too much concern. But I think that in terms of what we're seeing from Star Wars versus the MCU right now, I think it's trending towards what you're saying. I think, and the fact that Star Wars has already been around for so long. I mean, it's, as far as the cinematic universe stands, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can't really come close to how intricate all the comics are, but in terms of movies and what's on screen, I think Star Wars is probably gonna surpass, especially unless MCU turns their stuff around. I think they're gonna start.
Apparently they are. Feige said that they're gonna focus on more quality over quantity after Phase 4. So we'll see if they actually stick to that.
People have been screaming for it forever.
Yeah.
So I think they're smart enough to know, hey, enough people get upset, we're gonna have problems. We want to keep people happy. So we want to get back to that secret formula where everyone shows up to theaters no matter what we do. Gotta keep them happy.
And Star Wars is doing that too. Like, we're not gonna get another Star Wars movie for a couple more years. Like, Star Wars has kind of figured that out. They had a rough patch with the sequel trilogy, but it is what it is. Sequel trilogy could potentially be saved. I mean, we have Andy Serkis in Andor, and we have Andy Serkis in the sequel trilogy. According to him, according to Andy Serkis, the two characters are not at all related, but we don't actually see what happens to Kino Loy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's all.
That was, gosh, he was so good. He was so good. There's nothing, I think, almost out of every arc I've ever watched out of Star Wars, I don't think it'll ever come close to as good as what that was. That was just phenomenal. The only thing better as far as straight story-wise that I think was written better and had maybe a little bit more impact was that last, like, 3 episodes.
The Siege of Mandalore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that is, like, something that you're never going to be able to touch, like, really top, because Order 66, just a way that just works and flows.
Yes.
And especially from our point of view as, like, kids growing up with that show and seeing, literally growing with the show has a little bit different perspective, so we might be a little biased on that.
Well, even just seeing how the clones aren't just faceless villains like the Empire turns them into, which is what this show really kind of emphasized, was just how like, they don't care about anything. Like, they know they're in control, and that ends up being their ultimate demise. But, like, with Siege of Mandalore, like, it was so impactful because you're seeing these people who are being forced to do something that they don't want to do. Like, they were created, they thought they were created for something more, and it ended up being, I don't know. I go on and on about the Siege of Mandalore.
No, it's pretty crazy. It's
so good.
It's crazy, but 10 out of 10. I think we do got to talk about how good this show looked too, just from a visual standpoint, right?
Yes. So this show had an estimated budget of $15 to $25 million per episode, which is pretty standard for these Disney Plus shows. But the thing that sets that budget, the thing that sets it apart from, especially the other Star Wars shows, is how they were on almost all practical sets. They were on location as often as possible. Like, and I think that helped sell the realism. That's something that Tony Gilroy talked about, was like, you can't, while it's really cool, to have the big LED screens that Mando uses, for Mando it works. For this show, that would have completely destroyed the vibe that they were going for and the look that they were going for. Yeah,
it would have been so hard to achieve some of the things that they did virtually on those sets. I think really good call going more practical, and I think moving forward, the more they can get away with that, the better. I think we can get some good stuff. It's so tough because you never really know, like, which one's gonna be better. It's so tough because The Mandalorian did it so well and they executed it so well. And we saw what it can be, but then also it's like, well, like with Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, we saw some of those imperfections and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't know. We'll have to see what this new season of Mando is, and I mean, you'd hope it wouldn't be limited to just Mandalorian, right? Like, you're like, okay, hopefully, like, there's other ways that they can use this technology to make it work. But man,
just the realism in this show, the way it looked was incredible. That's one of the few things that, like, kept me engaged on those episodes where I just I just wasn't engaged at all. I know a lot of people would disagree with me on that, but there were a couple episodes where I was just like, why? I think the episode after Aldani, where it's just like a bunch of banter about nothing. Like, I remember sitting there like, why? What is happening? Why? I don't care about any of this. Andor just got sent to prison. What's going on with that? I want to hear about this prison. Which I keep going back to the prison, but like we said, it's one of the greatest things. The sci-fi of that prison was so cool. Like, how that's something Gilroy talked about in that article, was like how like they didn't want to just create another prison that we've all seen a million times before. Because like ultimately, the prison break's a prison break, but like the fact that like the floors electrify you and like you have to walk around barefoot and like just the constant fear that any moment someone could flick a switch and you could suffer that much and potentially die. Like that is such a cool sci-fi idea for a prison.
Yeah, no, really, really unique. Something that definitely helped them out a lot here, and just works. Works. Yeah, I was just in love the entire time. Visually, it looked fantastic. The story kept me in, you know what I mean? It kept me up to pace. And even when you had some of those slower segments and you're like, okay, why are we here? Like I could at least just sit there and appreciate how well, you know what I mean? It looks nice. There was never really a scene that I was like, maybe, but everything just looked so cohesive. Yeah. And looked very like, it felt like you were in the Star Wars universe the whole time. I never really felt at any point I'm like, oh, I'm not in Star Wars. I'm somewhere else, or I'm looking at an LED wall. You know, like the whole time felt like I was there with the characters.
Even seeing a practical Coruscant, which I don't think we've ever seen before, like that still felt like Coruscant. Yeah,
definitely. It was something pretty special. The airport. Oh my gosh. Coruscant Airport was such a good idea. Like hats off to these producers and these like location scouts. They did such a good job finding these places. I mean, wow. It felt like cinema. Even, you know what I mean? Even though it's a TV show, it felt like cinema. Like these people were really trying to push the boundaries of what they could do. And I think even in that preview we saw before Rogue One, he literally said this is going to be one of the best visually appealing shows that you're going to see. And I mean, was not lying to us. Yeah. Was not lying. That was something special. And even like some of the aspects that aren't practical, like, oh my gosh, like the meteor shower, that was insane. I like the whole time they were talking about it, I'm like, dude, please just let me see this now. Like, I just give it to me. I know this is going to look so good. Just please let me see it. And it looks so good. And then, gosh, just besides the prison scene, the next best thing in this show was Luthen escaping the freaking tractor beam.
I thought that was the coolest thing of all time. I had some coworkers who were like, that was so stupid. Like, it was so boring that they had to throw in some like stupid fake lightsaber thing. Like, no, that was so cool.
It was so good. Imagine watching that in the theater. See, I still think I would have loved to get this, like, just release 3 episode arcs in theaters over the course of a year. Oh, it'd be so fun.
That would be really cool. Good. And with that scene too, I liked how throughout the show we saw the progression that the Empire was taking. Like the tractor beam wasn't some like thing you don't actually see on a Star Destroyer. It was actually it's newer technology. So it was like this whole big satellite dish looking thing. Like I liked how we're actually seeing like things progress because they just didn't happen overnight. We saw actual clone troopers marching around. Like we get to see the stormtroopers evolve and come to life. So many great things. Cool. We're not done talking Andor, but do you have any final thoughts for just, season 1 of Andor, or like predictions or things you want to see for season 2?
Yeah, season 2. I'm interested to see how the dynamic between Luthen and Andor works. I think it was really cool just right out the rip when they first met, even though it was like episode 3 or whatever. But like right when they first met, I was like, oh, these two are going to be like gold story-wise, just interaction, the what do you call it? The dynamic, how they interact with each other is just
I think both of them being so distrusting is going to be really interesting to watch the two dance around trying to get what they both want. Do we think Luthen's a Jedi? Do we think he's like a
We going there? Is that later?
That's a very popular theory going around. You know what? That's a fantastic segue. That I'm going to make into a segue, because we're asking the question: is Andor really Star Wars? Because a lot of the critics of this show have complained about how like this is very not Star Warsy. And we're going to kind of look at like critic scores versus audience scores for different like Star Wars projects and things. Next segment, like I want to break down like how Andor isn't Star Wars, kind of like how like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker isn't really Batman. So yeah, we're gonna talk about that next segment and the lack of Jedi in Andor. That's how I'm tying that all together. So stay tuned to hear all about that.
Dude, I'm so glad we're doing this.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a lot of fun, and it's not as difficult as I thought it would be.
No, not at all. Like Anchor has made it especially easy when it comes to like actually getting our podcast out on the air. Because when hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on all the listening platforms. So easy getting it over to Spotify, getting it to Apple, wherever you're trying to get your podcast to. Yeah,
I think we're on like 7 platforms just through Anchor, and not even just the distribution, but even just creating the podcast. Like there's so many recording and editing tools within it, so you can record, edit, add music in, sound effects, all sorts of things directly through Anchor, and it is free.
Dude, that's amazing.
It's incredible. So if you would like to start your own podcast, just like ours, go to anchor.fm on your desktop device, or you can go on to your mobile app store and download the Anchor app. We are back discussing Andor, a show that Brenden really loved and I kind of liked. So yeah, when the premiere came out, actually, there were some coworkers of mine who were talking, and I don't completely agree with like his arguments, but the statement that he made that just made me think a little bit was he said Andor just isn't Star Wars. And he was making all sorts of stuff like you need clone troopers and lightsabers and all this, and that's what Star Wars is. And I don't think Star Wars necessarily needs to have all those things, but I do think it is an interesting point, an interesting statement to that Andor isn't Star Wars. Because when you break it down, there is so much of this show that isn't what we're used to seeing from something that has been going on for so long, and that, I mean, people are constantly saying like this was like my Star Wars. Like, I don't know, Star Wars has such a big impact on so many people that when you change it as drastically as Andor has, it's going to ruffle some feathers. We've already kind of discussed some of them. The look of the show, with it not being super CG. I mean, the prequel trilogy is, I don't know why they hired anybody, like any actual actors, because everything was CG. So we have like lots more practical stuff going on. The score on this show, we didn't talk about. The score was brilliant. I loved it. Yeah. But it was not the big romantic era style music that we're used to hearing. It wasn't John Williams' score. Like even Ludwig Göransson with the Mandalorian theme, like while it is kind of his own thing, he then brings in all the horns and everything, and he makes it grand and makes it feel like Star Wars. Here it was totally different. So like there's just a lot of different things that Andor did that wasn't very Star Wars. So like, were there any other things, Brenden, that you noticed that were just very non-traditional for Star Wars?
I don't know. I mean, for me personally, it felt like it checked all the boxes that I needed to think Star Wars.
Okay, well then what are those boxes?
I mean, those boxes are, there has to be some kind of battle between good and bad. Like that's like, it has to be a center focal point of what's going on. There's got to be some kind of opposing force. The next box is obviously the space planet type stuff. Anything to do with that kind of world building. There's got to be some unique set locations. There's got to be some unique something that you don't think would exist on Earth, happening, right? Or some kind of scenario where, whether it be the different races or whatever, like something that just helps separate you from an average show with, normal space politics type stuff.
Yeah.
I think that the next thing for me, and this is a big one, is like the weapons and the ships specifically. Like for me to think Star Wars, I need to hear those TIE fighter noises. I need to see those Star Destroyers. I need to see like just the way the guns look, shoot, feel. Like just, it has to be Star Wars-y or it doesn't really feel Star Wars. And this show brought that for sure. The only thing that might have been missing was the only thing that I appreciate more than some really good storylines is just some bad as lightsaber fights. That is all I want. Like really good choreographed lightsaber fights, whether it's animated or not. I don't discriminate. I love it. Either which way, give me some cool looking stuff. And recently, the live action lightsaber fights have not delivered. So,
I mean, Obi-Wan Darth Vader was kind of cool.
It was fun.
It wasn't like top tier, but it wasn't bad. I don't think the last one. Their first fight was pathetic, but the last fight.
Yeah, the last one. If that didn't happen, I would have been so pissed. I would have been throwing stuff out of the window. I would have been so mad. But in general, I think the fact that this doesn't have a lightsaber battle, that it can mess up, borderline helps it. Because
interesting point.
I'm just gonna critique every single thing I see lightsaber wise, unless it's like just flawless. So I think that's a big thing for me, because it might have just been because I was younger when I watched episode 3, but it just doesn't get much better than those prequels lightsaber. You know what I mean? It's just so good.
To an extent.
It's
for me, I'm taking out of it because it's so ridiculous because nothing's real. Like if it's animated, that's one thing because it's like supposed to be that way. But then when you see it live action, they're limited by what the actors can do, but it's all CG anyway. Yeah. So then it's like, why don't you just CG the actor too? But that's just me being, I'm very, very petty about the fact that the prequels are all CG, but that's neither here nor there. I totally agree with that list. I think that's a solid one. And I mean, we got all those things with this show. Like even when you say like weapons, I just think in general, just the way that normal everyday items look, the funeral procession that they had, like the horns, they could have just made normal horns like any other sci-fi show would do. But instead they added all these extra little elements to them. Like you could tell that they're playing a flute, but it looks very distinctly sci-fi and different, just like they did with the original Cantina band in episode 4. Like, you know, they kept that style going, and like that puts you more into that world. The suits, that's the one thing with the weird cop dude that got sealed up by his mom. That's the one thing I appreciated, was seeing what a suit looks like in the Star Wars universe.
That
like
was so
the weird
funny.
little tie thing. Like, I don't know.
So good. Oh man. Yeah.
And the cubicles, I loved that so much.
To see kind of a little slice of life with Star Wars.
Yeah.
That's it's good. I think it's still Star Wars. It's something that we're not used to, but dude, it was phenomenal. How do you not want that? Like, man.
Well, and I think that's also another way that like Andor deviates from Star Wars while also elevating it, is all the slice of life stuff. Because Star Wars typically is just, we gotta go fight this battle, we gotta defeat the bad guy. But like,
there's just
the first 3 episodes of this show are basically just, we're just gonna show you what life is like on this tiny little planet. They have like a little anvil clock guy, and here's what it looks like to go to work every day. And like, I don't know, like there was lots of little things that as a Star Wars fan were super interesting to see. Personally, I thought some of them destroyed the pacing. And I don't know if it was worth it. I know a majority of people disagree with me. Here's a fun fact that we didn't get to. The reception for this show. Rotten Tomatoes has a 96% critic score and an 85% audience score. IMDb has an 8.4 overall. The highest episode being episode 10 with a 9.5. That's when they do the prison break. And the lowest episode was episode 2 with a 7.3. So the fact that the average is 8.4 really shows you the spread that this whole show had. It was all over the place in terms of IMDb ratings. So yeah, that's just if you were curious and waiting to hear about that. There you go. Yeah, so like I feel like the biggest thing though that like separates Andor from the rest of Star Wars is that Andor is so gritty, and normally Star Wars is very fantastical.
Yeah, it feels polished almost.
Yeah, like comparing just like episode like the original Star Wars, like that's all. If you think about it, like Luke's parents, Luke's aunt and uncle are burned in their house, and then he like goes on this great adventure and he saves a princess, and it's all like happy-go-lucky, like whatever. Like Luke should be a very tragic character, and they kind of explore that later on. But like he seems like a nice, happy dude. Like, oh, I got a lightsaber, guys. Like I'm gonna go fight people. Like it's I don't know. It feels very fantastical. Whereas here, like right off the bat, like we're in the slums, and like we've seen some of this before, but like the curtain is really pulled back. He's like talking to a prostitute, and then he goes and he murders people. Like it's so dark and gritty, and even like you were saying, like it has to be about good versus evil. In A New Hope, that is very cut and dry. It is everyone is purely good or they are purely evil in that movie. Whereas in here, like you see both sides to this of the coin. Like the Empire is pretty much entirely evil, but I almost feel like part of the officer guy's arc was showing that they are sometimes just people who believe in a cause. But then on the rebel side, like you're having discussions where Luthen is like, hey, I know that this big rebel leader is going to get massacred. Do I stop him and tell the Empire we know, or do we just let him go and die? And like the fact that they're showing the darkness of the rebellion and of that good, just it takes that to a whole new level. It's not just it's not so cut and dry anymore. It's still good versus evil, but it's not. There's still a little bit of a gray area where there is a line that can be crossed.
Yeah, and it almost feels like we get a little bit of that within the Jedi Council in general, because
that's true.
Sometimes sometimes we'll see characters explore like, am I really a Jedi? You know, like they have some issues with what they do fighting in the Clone Wars, like they did, like are we supposed to be warriors?
That's the show that I want. I know that they're trying to like go away from a lot of that, but that's what I really want, a show that tackles the corruption within the council.
I need it
during the Clone Wars. Honestly, I mean, Alan Rickman's gone, so maybe we shouldn't do a young Count Dooku, but a young Count Dooku, be like with what we got with Tales of the Jedi, like just those stories in live action would be so cool. Or even just make a show about Qui-Gon. A Qui-Gon spinoff would be so good. And could just explore all those ideas of like, of the corruption. Like, what is it to be a Jedi? And, that could be brilliant. And maybe Ahsoka will tackle that a little bit, because that was also kind of her whole arc was realizing that's not what the Jedi is. So maybe we'll get some of that. I don't know.
Yeah. I would be very surprised if we didn't get a little bit. I really just want, if I can get Old Republic stuff, like Republic, what we've already kind of seen, just expand upon that. Those are my two favorite segments out of the entire Star Wars universe. Anything else, I'm like kind of like, whatever. I kind of some of the stuff we're getting now that revolves around the rebellion so much is kind of cool, but also we've seen it so much. It's getting a little old. I want to see something a little different. I think we can change it up. And I don't know if that's partly because they've invested so much into this like world building. It's easy for them to just keep pumping out stories that are set in this stage where there's the Empire and the Rebellion, or it's the First Order, or it's the Rebellion. It just I don't know.
I'm gonna ignore the sequel trilogy. I prefer to pretend that it doesn't exist. But
Does not happen.
But when it comes to like, I feel like Disney is self-aware enough to know that the original trilogy is the best that Star Wars has to offer, as a whole. And when it comes to audience, that's what their main audience is going to come back for. And so I feel like they're really trying to they're grinding every ounce of story that they can pull out of the original trilogy to bring in that audience. Because if they introduce an Old Republic, I mean, you would have your hardcore Star Wars fans who'd be really excited. You have the fans who like played like Knights of the Old Republic and everything. They'd be excited, but it would be so new to so many people that I wonder if their concern is it wouldn't sell as well, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe even cut your losses. Like, they know that these shows are a little bit more, I guess, easier to cost recover than movies per se. So,
potentially, I still just don't understand how they are able to justify $25 million per episode off Disney Plus subscriptions. My brain cannot comprehend it. It doesn't.
They're about to go up. What is it, 12 now? I think it's going to be 10, 12 soon, right?
12 what? Oh, is it?
$12 a month. I think it's going up.
Oh,
it was $8.99 for quite a while, and I think they're
right.
I think they're bumping it up in the end of the year.
I mean, they're gonna have to if they keep making shows like this. I cannot comprehend how it's profitable, but
yeah, I mean, they may be seeing a little bit of that. Like, I think originally when I saw reviews coming out, I saw that the show wasn't doing that great as far as viewership was going. I don't know.
Andor was.
It's not doing what they were really wanting it.
Andor was not as successful as they had hoped. Here's a question I have for you. I don't know if you saw this, but I saw that they actually showed the first 2 episodes of Andor on cable during like the Thanksgiving week, like that Wednesday, like that Thursday, Friday, Saturday on like Fox and ABC and like different every night. It was on a different cable network, and they showed the first 2 episodes. Which was an interesting strategy. Yeah. But with this show being so un-Star Wars, and at first glance, if you were just just scrolling through TV, like, what's this show? And there was no indication that it's Star Wars in those first 2 episodes. Do you think that like this could bring in a new audience for Star Wars? Like, could people get so invested in this that they say, oh, there's Rogue One, let me go watch this. And then they're like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I should go watch what happens next. Like, do you think Andor could bring in a new audience, or is it so different that once they saw that it was, Star Wars or something different, they would be turned off to it?
That's tough, because I think at the core, you're going to have, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be something they're going to be able to rely on consistently.
Sure.
I think this show is set up for a specific base of people, of fans that understand the universe. They know what's going on, have seen Rogue One. I think that's a big part of it. I'd be curious to see how many people have watched this show that haven't seen Rogue One. I'd be really curious.
That's a really good question.
If there's anyone that's just watched this without knowing what happened in Rogue One, and they're like, oh, well, if you want to see what happens to the end of this guy, like, check out Rogue One, ready to be depressed. But I don't know. I feel like just releasing that episode, that almost may have hurt them more than it helped them if they did that.
Really?
Is that something they did? It's like that happened?
Yeah. They released the first 2 episodes on cable.
See, those first 2 episodes were pretty dry. I feel like they'd be way better off giving us a little taste of a cool scene somewhere in there instead of a full episode. And I wonder if they had some reviews back about the show, and because they did extend it. It was supposed to come out way before it did, right?
Got
pushed back by a little.
It got pushed back a month.
Okay, that's not bad.
But I can't remember, because that's why we got the Rogue One re-release. I don't remember why it got pushed back though. I wonder if what you're saying is right. I wonder if they had to like go back into the edit suite and fix pacing issues.
They wanted to.
I mean, they still exist, in my opinion. Again, I've seen so many people who would disagree strongly with me, but I was bored out of my mind.
I don't know. It's tough because watching it every night, if I was to watch it straight through, no breaks, I think I would see it much more apparent than maybe I did. Because just watching episode by episode as it's being dropped, I'm just sitting there like, I'm starved of some good Star Wars content recently, so I will be gobbling that up so fast. Like, I don't care. And anything that's like, even like a 3 out of 5, like I'm gonna be.
And that's something that like you kind of have to consider too when you're talking about like different things. Like one of my favorite critics, he says like the greatest movie of all time is Lawrence in Arabia, but only if you see it in a theater. If you watch it just at home, it's not going to be that. It's not going to have the same impact. And it's kind of the same way. Like I wonder. The reason I need to rewatch it is because I wonder if my experience watching it is what affected how I felt. Because I was watching it week to week. And
that's gotta be why
I was watching it week to week
so much more.
And I was watching it like at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm like, I've been up all day working. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. There's just a bunch of monologues. There's nothing like super like engaging to keep my interest.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that has an aspect of why I didn't enjoy that show as much. Because the other thing is, because I was getting so tired and I was bored of it, I wasn't doing it at 2 or 3 in the morning every week. Sometimes I was waiting until the next day, and a lot of those episodes are the ones that I enjoyed a lot more. So I wonder if just my experience with the show ended up being part of why I didn't love it as much as everybody else.
I waited till Thursday each week to watch it because I worked on Wednesdays. Yeah, I was like, I can just wake up Thursday morning before class, and I have like an hour to kill, and I'm just gonna roll over, turn on the Star Wars. Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I think that could be part of it. I think, especially recently, as we're going back to theaters since being away from for a while, I wonder if it has kind of ruined your like at-home movie experience. Just the fact that you're obviously you're gonna get a higher quality sitting, in a theater, but just in general, how much different it is than being in your own. Like, I haven't watched. I think Top Gun is out on like HBO or something.
Is it?
I think it's out somewhere. I think it was viewable.
I know you can like buy it on digital stores.
Maybe it's like a purchasable thing. But I was sitting there like, if I rewatch this movie in my living room with like my TV speakers, I am not going to be impressed. I'm going to be so let down. There's no way I can watch this movie normally. Like, I can only watch it in theaters, right?
Yeah.
There's like maybe down the road if I had like a good audio system, but even then, the IMAX screen with the Dolby Atmos surround sound, I don't think you can. That's a sponsorship, by the way. Go check it out. But I just don't think you can top that. It's just, I'm gonna be let down if I don't get that experience.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because, like you were saying, like this show, you could have just released the arcs in theaters, and it would have been incredible. I wonder if like that had an aspect.
It would have been very risky. They probably would not have made their money back anywhere close. But gosh, imagine them releasing like an hour and a half long episode like throughout a year. Every 2 months you get a new episode in theaters, and then it comes to Disney Plus if you don't want to watch it in theaters. God, I'd be so excited for that. That'd be so fun. I think I said... Yeah, go ahead.
I would even be interesting to see like if they released it on Disney Plus like they normally would, but then maybe before the finale or even like right after, if then they released the first few in theaters, or if they said, okay, everybody loves the prison sequences, let's play those 3 episodes in theaters, or maybe even do like a special cut of it where it's only the prison sequences, and so you don't have everything else going on. It's just a straight cut of all of them. I know we're getting
and maybe
we're
some
getting,
like
we're
extra
getting,
footage.
Yeah, we're
Some
getting
extra
so
footage.
off topic now, but
Like they could
that's something that they
expand
do.
and really see. Oh,
Yeah,
man,
so that's something
God.
they do with like with classic Doctor Who. They would have like these 6-7 episode arcs. They were all like half an hour, and so what they'll do is they'll cut out some of the fluff, they'll add in some extra scenes, and they'll put them all together, and like they'll make it seem like they'll make it seem like it's supposed to be a movie, and then they will release it in theaters, and it's always a cool experience. That could be really interesting for them to do with something like Andor. That would completely change the way that they've attacked Star Wars so far. And I feel like Andor is the only show at this point that they could pull that off with.
I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Did Gilroy direct everything, or did he write? Just
no, Tony Gilroy was the creator. They had different directors, and I think they might have had a writer's room.
Okay.
But
yeah. That's like so curious to me, because I think I was looking at the IMDb page and I noticed that there were different directors for different episodes, and then there were like every 3 episodes they swapped cinematographers too.
Yeah, that's
like
they'll give every 3 episodes
to me. I don't know. Maybe that's typical for TV shows. I haven't really been involved with a lot of like television, but
that's pretty normal.
So strange. Okay, that's like pretty consistent. It's like, how does it all so like flow similarly? Like, oh, interesting.
Yeah,
but I didn't want to say. I was like, man,
and they'll do that with a lot of things. So they might have like an editor might edit 3 episodes, and most of the time it's like in a row, but sometimes it'll be like every other or
always
whatever.
Bounce around. Yeah,
just to divide the labor, because doing every single episode would take so long for everybody to do. They almost have to.
I think one of the directors had done a few episodes of Sherlock Holmes and did a few Doctor Who episodes, I think, too.
Interesting.
One of them did. Yeah, it's interesting you pointed out the Doctor Who connection there.
Mm-hmm. That's just because I love Doctor Who way too much.
Number 10. Wait, what? Oh, okay. So, yeah, I think some theatrical releases of some TV series would go crazy. I think I remember begging for that last Clone Wars series.
If they released the Siege of Mandalore in theaters, I would actually die. I would no longer exist. I would drop dead the minute it started. I wouldn't survive.
I think
seeing Maul and Ahsoka fight, like,
I think I was talking to someone on campus about it. I was like, dude, could you imagine just give it to us in the theaters? Give me that big screen, because I
don't even want to think about it, because it's gonna make me too sad that it doesn't exist.
I think we get the buzz going, we make it happen, but yeah, we got really off topic.
First, folks. We got really off topic, but you know what? I think we had some really great discussion.
Oh, so good. And I am curious though.
Yeah.
I am curious though about like what section of Star Wars do people like the most? Like, I need like a poll, you know? I feel like a poll's coming here. I need to know.
I mean, are you saying like prequel, original, sequel?
What section of Star Wars do people like the most? Like, what would you like to be explored more? And maybe even like,
I feel like the question you're asking is wrong.
Republic stuff.
Because I think the obvious answer is the original trilogy and pre-rebellion type stuff. I think that's the most liked. But what should be the most explored? But what should be the most explored? That's another question that I think could be interesting, because I feel like there's a good argument for Old Republic, but I think there's also, with The Mandalorian being as successful as it is, I feel like pre-sequel trilogy or post-original trilogy is maybe has the most interest.
All right. I need to know. I need a poll. I need to know.
All right. That's going to be one of our Spotify polls this week. So if you're listening on Spotify, or if you're not, go to Spotify and go answer our poll. Which era of Star Wars do you want to see explored the most?
Just vote Republic, because you know that's the right answer.
Let's just appease Brenden. He's been working so hard coming on the podcast these past couple of weeks. He's been really pulling his weight. This is all he wants in return.
Yep. Just please give me your votes. I'd like to thank the Academy.
Brenden, do you have any final thoughts on Andor, or is it even really Star Wars? Do you think Andor is even really Star Wars? I guess you kind of answer that here at the front.
It's for sure Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's different, but it's Star Wars.
Yes.
I don't think there's not much arguing against it, minus maybe if you're really looking for like a super intense score,
There are no Jedi.
Specific. And well,
there are hopefully no Jedi. I do not want any Jedi in my Andor show.
Oh man. Yeah, no Jedi. But I think it's good. I think it works.
Yeah, I do like Andor. I want to make that clear. Like, I did enjoy the show. It wasn't a bad show. It just wasn't I don't think it's as great as everyone else thinks it is at this point in time.
It could be better?
I think it could have been better.
Yeah.
And I worked with some people who they absolutely hated this show. And just all in the podcast on this. One of them said like, yeah, like Andy Serkis, like he like Andy Serkis saved Andor. He just couldn't swim. and that
I was so sad. Oh my gosh. They did so good. That whole scene.
It was tragic.
Man. Like heart, like just right in the chest the whole time because you know how it's gonna end. Oh man.
You've been listening to the Popcorn Hangover. I'm Alex. That is Brenden. We've been discussing Andor, the newest show from Star Wars. Let us know what your thoughts were on Andor on all the things: Instagram, TikTok, patreon.com/thepopcornhangover. Next week, we are diving into a lesser known film that is starring some people who you will know, and we're getting to Oscar season, everybody. So that's
Oscar watch.
That's all I'll say. Yeah, that's all I got for you.
All right.